This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here at Toronto Raw Wine Fair 2023 with none other than the founder of Raw Wine, Isabelle Legeron, MW. How are you today, madam?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you.
Super. Yep. Thank you for joining us in Toronto, and thank you for joining us at Good Food Revolution. Now, I think the first question I would like to ask you was, what was your first exposure to natural wines?
My first exposure?
Yes.
Wow. So look, when I first started working in wine, or in wine is not my first career. I was brought up on a vineyard, and I spent a lot of time, all my childhood was, doing the vintage. All my family grow grapes for the cognac industry.
I see.
And then, I went to university, studied business, did something completely different in London. And then when I was 28, my father passed away really suddenly from lung cancer due to overspraying the vines, because they actually witnessed the conversion of organic to conventional while I was growing up.
Yeah.
And so that really made me think a lot about home, about my upbringing, and I decided to go back to wine. So I went, to back to study. I did the WSET, the diploma, and then the Master of Wine in 4 years. But then, when I got into the wine industry, into like working in wine, I realized actually the wine industry is just like it's an industry, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's just about making it work and business decisions. And I didn't really feel like there was not a lot of, I don't know, it's not that I didn't fit, but it didn't really resonate with me. I was like, I left business to go back into business.
It's like the romanticism of wine had just disappeared when you saw the business side of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I was looking for, I wanted to work with farmers, and that's what really inspired me to go back to wine. So, but then gradually throughout my studies, particularly in the MW, obviously, I was traveling a lot to study, and I was, started getting exposed to bottles that were tasting different.
Right.
And also people who were, like really talking about things that I really wanted to learn more about, like Nicolas Joly and all that.
So was the biodynamic angle your kind of gateway drug into the natural world?
No, it wasn't. I think it was just a combination of tasting wines I suddenly loved and could see myself, drinking a lot more of. A combination of meeting, people who I guess who were starting to explain a lot more about the impact of farming, understanding more about, of course, biodynamic, and also realizing that, biodynamic farming is actually a lot like the way my grandparents used to farm.
I hear you, yes.
And for them, the lunar cycle was incredibly important, and so on. So it was just a combination of things, and then slowly the penny started to drop, because I was, there was a huge paradox when I was studying. I was obviously visiting very high tech, let's say prestigious in that sense, wineries with huge facilities, making wines that were okay, and then also coming across people who had just like a hole dug literally on the side of the mountain.
I've been to those places.
Making incredible wines with just literally no pumps, no equipment, nothing, and no formal training. And then I actually realized that the farming is what matters. And so this is but I was studying for the MW, so I had to kind of be quite rigorous about the way I was tasting and in order to get onto the other side. And then the minute I became an MW, I remember the phone call started ringing saying, we want to employ you. I had a lot of job offers from these big vineyards, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm now going to just focus on the stuff that I love, which were natural wine. And this is from that point onwards, I just focused entirely on that.
It's interesting. I find it fascinating how you approach the world of natural wine from that kind of academic master of wine angle, and how the two of those come together.
But they really do, and
right.
This is like this is interesting, because when I started the MW, I actually knew nothing about the MW. I had to find somebody to sponsor me into the program.
Right.
And if I'd known what the MW entailed in terms of work, I probably would have never done it.
Yeah, I've heard people say that.
Which is good. But, I actually love studying, and I do well at exams, and I passed, I would say quite, with a lot of work, but, I passed quite easily. But throughout what's interesting about the MW is in the MW is not about formatting people into being a certain way. It's just about giving you enough exposure and enough knowledge so that you can just make your have your own identity. And in my writing, because the MW is actually essentially a written exam, even in the tasting is heavy, I was able to argue my case for spontaneous fermentation, low use of sulfites, but I had the knowledge to back it up. So I did really well on the written part with a lot of examples from the natural wine world. And I think you can. I think this is a bit of a misconception because in a way when you finish the MW and then you have access to actually maybe a prestigious career and then economically speaking as well, I think this is a path that people take. But you can really do both, and you can do both well. But for me, it's important to have tasted, all these, vintage ports and done vertical of Petrus and vertical of Yquem and all of that. Even though they're wines I would, not the port, but Yquem is not a wine I would drink.
I hear you.
But it's great to have tasted that because you have a reference point there. So,
and
I think that's one of the things that I find in a way in the young sommelier or people who are working in front of house is sometimes I find a conversation of being slightly almost forgetful or dismissive of actually the conventional, more classic, traditional wine industry.
I can understand
and I think you need that in order to actually communicate to your customers from a different place, and I think that's important. So I'm actually really happy I did that, and it benefits me all the time. The way you learn to taste through the MW program is incredibly rigorous, and I still taste like that. I still taste with a lot of that in me, of the rigor, the intensity, the complexity, the length. Like I've got all of this, it's just I use it for a different type of wine.
Having gone through the WSET program myself, I was always curious as to how someone like yourself, who's done the MW, uses that structured tasting process when you're looking at natural wines, because I think I have a more traditional, conventional palate simply because of the time I grew up and my wine education and the like, because this is all very subjective, but when one is analysing a wine, following that process from the WSET, one is looking for faults at the beginning, quite often, and you're looking to, if you tick these boxes, sometimes you don't want to take it any further once you get up there.
Sure,
so I guess that leads to the question, for you, when you're looking at a wine, when does a fault become a feature, and inversely, when does a feature become a fault? Now that's a big question there.
There's a lot there, but look, yes, of course. I think the WSET or stuff which is more kind of establishment ways of tasting wines, and also some wine competitions, are not appropriate or are inadequate when it's coming to taste natural wine. Of course, the wine is hazy, which is the first thing that people will just say, it's not going to work because this wine is hazy, therefore it's faulty. So, but this is like on a very basic level.
I'm sure when you were doing your diploma, you were, when you weren't as attuned to the natural wine scene, you would sometimes look at a cloudy wine and think, well, what's going on here?
Sure. Yeah. Except, to be honest, I don't think they ever would put a cloudy wine in front of you when you're doing the
true. This is true.
The classroom. I don't know if anybody ever there doing that, but I think fault is an interesting one.